Alabama going to LSU in Baton Rouge as a 3-point favorite. The over-under in this game, 58.5. Expecting quite a few points. I think, guys, I'll start here. We talked about last week Penn State, Ohio State. The stakes of that game, the consequences of that game in the 12-team playoff era are lessened a little bit. But this game would just be kind of another game without the 12-team playoff. I think this is the test case for, hey, this is a game with a ton of stakes. It's a de facto playoff elimination game. For Alabama, for LSU, the playoff starts now. You've got to keep winning games. But, Damien, this is a really interesting rivalry. I wanted to start there with you.
A very intense rivalry.
Because, the fan bases and there's no trophy, there's no fancy nickname, but these have just been two of the best teams in the SEC for a long time that have had dominant national title caliber teams. How would you characterize this rivalry versus, the ones that have names, that have a little bit more tradition, like Tennessee, like Auburn?
Yeah, no, this is definitely a different rivalry. We despise LSU, and they weren't even really our biggest rival, but we despise them so much because we knew that we had to respect them, and we knew that we had to take them seriously because, one, they were so talented. I mean, Coach Saban has said before, you can shake a tree anywhere in Louisiana and find a 5-star guy. And they all love to go to LSU. And we knew that they were the only team that wasn't afraid of us, no matter what year it was, no matter who the coaches were, no matter what players they had. They were confident that they were the big dog in that matchup every single time. And like I said, they had guys that were big, that were strong, that were fast, that were dirty, that were nasty, all the things that make you afraid of a football team. And that's what we thought that we were. So whenever we always looked across the field at LSU and they were the team that thought that they were who we were, we couldn't stand them. And that's what made them such a big rival to us. But it was only because they were so good. And because of that, we had to respect them each and every single week. And I'm sure that Kalen DeBoer is telling this Alabama team the exact same thing. The LSU football program embodies the entire culture of the state of Louisiana. Their people are tough, they're gritty, and they think they're the bullies. And you have to go into this battle with, one, a hatred in your heart a little bit because you're playing such a dirty opponent, such an opponent that's going to give you such a tough time, but you also have to respect them because they have just the equal amount of talent. They have Brian Kelly, who's a phenomenal coach, who's been in situations like this before, who's played or coached in big games, I should say. So this is what that matchup means. You've got to have that hate in your heart so you can go in and be ready to do battle, but you also have to respect what LSU brings to the table because if you don't, they will beat you and they will punch you in the mouth and earn your respect.
Chris, this is going to be an interesting matchup. We've talked a lot about Jalen Milroe all season. If you read our Coaching Confidential ahead of that Tennessee game, we had a coach in there to talk about Jalen Milroe is the hardest player to tackle in the country. What does that kind of mean for LSU's defense?
Yeah, I mean, LSU's defense has done not so great with running quarterbacks this year. Lenora Sellers had 88 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground from South Carolina, although I think he got hurt in that game at one point too. And then Marcel Reed, we just saw a couple weeks ago, 62 yards and a half, 3 rushing touchdowns. They could not stop him on the ground either. So now you have Jalen Milroe, who is probably the best running quarterback in the country. And I think if you're Alabama, that bye week came at the perfect time. Milroe has seemed a bit banged up. He has been running more than I think we all expected him to this year. But this is the game where you kind of plan to do it, I think. And I think we'll see a lot of QB run game there. And, Alabama did shut down Taylon Green a little bit. I'm sorry, LSU shut down Taylon Green, had 3 sacks and whatnot. But expecting a lot of Jalen Milroe, expecting him to move the ball on the ground. And this game's also big for just the narrative of these two teams. If you're Alabama or LSU, if you're Kalen DeBoer, you lose 3 games in your first season post-Saban. That's existential crisis. And if you're LSU, the whole thing with Brian Kelly is, can you take that next step? Year 3 is where he always takes the next step at all of his schools. If you don't do that here, that becomes kind of a long-term question of is this the right guy to take us to that next level? Because the previous 3 coaches won national championships there. That's the goal at LSU. Damien played against those teams. And so can he not do that if they lose this game?
It's been a weird run for Brian Kelly because year 1 comes in with pretty modest expectations, wins the West, beats Bama, pretty unbelievable. And then year 2, okay, you've got Jaden Daniels, win the Heisman Trophy. Jaden Daniels in the driver's seat for NFL Rookie of the Year now. But, if you want to say you wasted that season, that's probably a fair description of that. to have the Heisman Trophy quarterback and finish your season in the Citrus Bowl? Where did they play? They beat the heck out of Wisconsin. That was the Garrett Nussmeier debut a little bit there. So now you're in this season where you've kind of fixed the defense. It's not really the disaster that it has been, but you don't really have the personnel. Now you're kind of within reach of the playoff, but it's been kind of a sort of season. It's been a weird run for him. Damien, from the Alabama perspective, what does this look like in Tuscaloosa if they win versus if they lose? What do you feel like is at stake for that program?
I think a huge sigh of relief will be breathed if Alabama wins this game, because everything that I just said, the matchup that this is, like, this is a measuring stick for Alabama. This is a measuring stick for Kalen DeBoer. I mean, we saw what happened against Vandy. We saw what happened against Tennessee. Hell, we almost saw what happened against South Carolina, or what could have potentially happened. But fans, people who have been a part of this rivalry for so long, people who know what the Alabama-LSU game means, they know that if Alabama wins this game, they're headed in the right direction. And like you said, having the bye before this game, you take care of business in Death Valley during a night game, and then you continue to build momentum going into the playoffs when they're already projected to be in the bracket. Like, I think, like I said, that's just going to give Alabama fans, it's going to give Kalen DeBoer, the whole team, it's going to give everybody a lot to look forward to the next couple weeks.
And I think, by the way, go ahead. Yeah, Alabama's schedule. After this game, it's Mercer, at Oklahoma, and Auburn. Like, you'll be heavily favored in all three of those. So, like, if Alabama
I don't see
wins
Vanderbilt anywhere on that schedule, so yeah.
No. LSU does have Vanderbilt, though, on its schedule. But if Alabama wins this game, barring something shocking, they'll be in the playoff if they win this game.
Yeah. Can I ask you both a question? Who do you think has more pressure on them to win this game, Brian Kelly or Kalen DeBoer?
It's a good question. I mean, from a reasonable mind or from the fan base's mind? Because
from
a
David
reasonable
Ubben
mind,
and Chris Vannini's mind.
Yeah, from my looking at it, okay. LSU, I think you're pointing, all the trend lines are pointing in the right direction, right? So even if you miss the,
I was gonna say defensively,
they're kind of going.
The program's okay.
They're going straight. They're not going up or down.
Okay. The program is okay. I don't have a lot of big picture concerns about LSU. They're like one, star player away on either side of the ball from being a team that can make some noise in the playoff versus just get in, which is kind of where they're at now. I think they can flip it pretty quickly and have a guy come in and, maybe it's the right portal pickup. It's their Keon Coleman, whoever you want to say, to take them to the next level. Alabama, I just think there was always going to be transition issues. And I think Kalen DeBoer figuring out what his program looks like at Alabama, people are going to be furious if they lose either of these games, but neither of these coaches necessarily are going to have to worry about their job. And I don't have big picture concerns with them. So I think probably Alabama fans would be angrier. So I'll say DeBoer from the reality standpoint, but from the measured observation standpoint, I think probably Brian Kelly, just because you're in year 3 and you're not necessarily getting better.
I think more pressure on Alabama. I think LSU's kind of in that Penn State area. But yeah.
Okay.
They should be.
Agree.
You're LSU. You should be able to recruit. I mean, this is why Brian Kelly came here, just to win a national championship. He hasn't had a team anywhere close to a team that looked capable of doing that at any point during this season. I mean, last year, I think they had better personnel last year, but the defense was such a disaster that it didn't really matter. I mean, you have an unbelievable receiving core. You have Jaden Daniels. You have Harold Perkins, Mason Smith, all these guys, and they just couldn't really put it together last year. So we'll see.